My sister called my husband's death a blessing to get money. I sent $18,000 for a year and a half believing a lie. But when they excluded my orphaned son from the Christmas gift exchange, I exposed everything in front of the entire family and destroyed her marriage. I'm 34 years old. I work in marketing. And 3 years ago, I lost my husband Andrew in a construction accident that basically left me alone, raising our son Jacob, who's now 7. What I'm about to tell you isn't just about that loss, but about how my own family tried to take advantage of us when we were at our most vulnerable, and how I ended up cutting ties with the people who were supposed to protect us. The truth is, I still have trouble processing everything that happened, especially the Christmas thing last year. But I need to get this off my chest because it was, literally, one of the most surreal and painful experiences of my life. Andrew and I met in college. We got married at 25, and Jacob came along when I was 27. We were happy, we had a normal life. Nothing extraordinary, but it was our life. He worked in construction, supervising big projects, and I had landed a decent position at a marketing firm. We lived in a modest house in the suburbs. Jacob went to a good school, and basically, we were building what we thought would be our future together. Andrew was one of those dads who gets completely involved. Like he'd come home from work covered in dust, and the first thing he'd do was look for Jacob to play or help him with his science experiments because our son has been obsessed with science since he was like 4 years old. Everything changed 3 years ago when Andrew was supervising a project and there was a structural collapse, something with some beams that failed. I don't know all the technical details because honestly, I can't read the reports without my stomach turning. But the point is, he died instantly, along with 2 other workers. He was 33 years old. The first months after his death were absolute hell. Jacob asked every day when Daddy was coming back, and I didn't know how to explain to a 4-year-old that his father was never coming back. My in-laws, Diane and Thomas, were incredible. Honestly, they temporarily moved into our house to help me with Jacob while I tried to keep my job and process everything. My own parents came to the funeral, of course, but then they kind of disappeared a bit, which at the time didn't seem that weird to me because they'd always been kind of distant with me. I have an older sister, Stephanie, who's always been the golden child of the family. And since we were girls, my parents treated her like she was perfect, while I was like the backup daughter. Stephanie has 3 kids. She's married to Eric, who works in finance, and she sells those multi-level marketing products, pyramid schemes disguised as business opportunities. And my parents act like she's a successful entrepreneur when the reality is Eric is the one who pays all their bills. Now, here comes the important part. Andrew had a $300,000 life insurance policy through his work. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to ensure that Jacob could go to college someday and that I could keep the house without going into immediate financial panic. I put most of it in a savings account for Jacob and used some to pay the mortgage and some expenses. I didn't tell anyone exactly how much it was because, honestly, it didn't seem like anyone's business but mine and my in-laws who were helping me manage everything responsibly. About 2 months after the funeral, my mom called and invited me to a special dinner at her house. She said she wanted us to spend time together as a family, that I looked very stressed and needed support. Sounds nice, right? Well, I got to the dinner and there were my mom, my dad, and Stephanie. And from the moment I sat down, I knew something weird was going on, because everyone had that energy like they were planning something. They started with casual questions about how I was handling everything, how the finances were going, if I needed help with anything, and I answered vaguely because I didn't want to get into details. But then my dad, direct as always, asked me how much Andrew's life insurance had been. I was like frozen because who asks that just like that? I told him it was enough to take care of Jacob and me, and that it was well managed, and I thought they'd be satisfied with that. But no, they kept pressing. Stephanie said something like she and Eric were going through difficult times financially, that her products weren't selling well, and that if I had that money, maybe I could help the family because that's what families do. Support each other. My mom added that Stephanie had 3 kids to support and I only had 1, as if that was a valid argument for me to give them my money. That night, I left there feeling super uncomfortable but tried to ignore it. However, Stephanie started calling me every week, sometimes several times a week, asking me for money for different things. Like she needed $500 to pay for her kids' school, or $200 for the dentist, or $1,000 for a car payment. And the worst, the absolutely worst, was when once she told me on the phone, and I swear this is verbatim, she said that Andrew's death had been a blessing because now I had resources to help the family. that it had literally been the answer to her prayers. I was speechless. I couldn't believe my own sister had just said that my husband's death, my son's father's death, was a positive thing because she needed money. I hung up on her and didn't answer for weeks. But then, like 6 months after that first dinner, my parents organized another family meeting, and this time they insisted so much that I ended up going. Stephanie was there with Eric. My parents had a whole presentation prepared, and basically it was a financial intervention against me. They said the family was going through hard times, that Stephanie really needed help, and that I had the ability to contribute. The proposal was that I would send $1,000 monthly to my parents to help with Stephanie's expenses, and that Stephanie would also try to contribute $500 when she could. They said it was temporary, just until Stephanie stabilized her multi-level business, and that it was the right thing to do for family. I was sitting there thinking, this is crazy. But my mom started crying, saying she didn't know what they were going to do, that they were so worried about the grandchildren, and basically they made me feel like the most selfish person in the world if I didn't accept. So, like an idiot, I agreed. I started sending $1,000 every month to my parents' account. This went on for almost a year and a half. Every month, I religiously transferred that money while raising Jacob alone, working full-time, dealing with my own grief, and trying to maintain some kind of normalcy for my son. Jacob was in therapy because obviously his dad's death had affected him tremendously, and I was also going to therapy. And everything cost money that I was paying while sending $1,000 monthly to my family. During all that time, Stephanie kept living her normal life, posting on social media about her products, about the vacations her family took, about the things she bought. And I tried not to think too much about it because, well, I had agreed to help. But then, like a year and a half ago, I was reviewing my bank statements because I wanted to reorganize Jacob's finances, see how much I had saved for his college, that kind of thing. I did calculations of everything I had spent since Andrew's death, and when I got to the family transfers part, I realized I had already sent almost $18,000 to my parents. $18,000. And something in my head clicked. Like, wait, Stephanie was supposed to also be contributing $500 monthly. That would mean between the two of us we would have sent like $27,000 total. I decided to call my mom and ask her casually how things were going. If the money was helping, that kind of question. And she started talking about how grateful they were, that with what I was sending they could help Stephanie with various things. And I said, oh yeah. And with what I think Stephanie sends, they must be able to do a lot too. And there was a silence on the other end of the phone. A long, uncomfortable silence. Then my mom said something like, well, Stephanie does what she can, and I pressed more. I asked her directly how much Stephanie had been sending, and eventually she admitted that Stephanie had never sent a single cent. Not 1 cent. It had all been a coordinated lie to make me feel less bad about sending the money, so I'd think I wasn't the only one contributing. I got furious. I told her I wasn't going to send another dollar, and that I couldn't believe they had lied to me like that. She tried to justify herself, saying that Stephanie really needed it and that I had the money anyway. And I hung up on her. I blocked Stephanie everywhere, stopped answering calls from my parents for a while, and honestly, I thought that would be the end of the drama. But no, because my family has a special talent for surpassing their own records of horrible behavior. Fast forward to last December, like 3 months after I discovered the money thing. My mom called me, and I answered because, I don't know, I guess part of me still had hope they could act like decent human beings. She told me they were going to have Christmas dinner at her house as always, that the whole family would be there, but that this year it was going to be adults only. She said they had decided it would be more relaxed without kids running around everywhere, that we could enjoy dinner peacefully, and that I should leave Jacob with my in-laws that night. It seemed weird to me because they had never done a Christmas without the kids, but I thought, well, maybe they want to try something different. I specifically asked her, so none of the kids are going to be there, right? And she said, correct. It's adults only. I told her I'd think about it and let her know. I talked to Diane and Thomas, my in-laws, and they said of course they could take care of Jacob on Christmas night, that in fact they were going to do fun science experiments with him because they had bought him a new kit. Jacob was excited about that. So I decided to go to my parents' dinner, mainly because I wanted to try to fix things with the family. You know, it was Christmas and all that. On December 24th, I arrived at my parents' house around 7 p.m. I knocked on the door, my dad opened it, and the first thing I hear from inside are children's voices. Many children's voices. I walk into the living room, and there are Stephanie's 3 kids running around everywhere, my cousins with their kids. Basically, all the family's extended children were there, everyone except Jacob. I stood in the entrance trying to process what I was seeing. My mom approached with that fake smile she puts on when she knows she did something wrong, and I said, "You told me it was adults only. What is this?" And she said, "Oh, Rebecca. Well, some of the kids wanted to come anyway. We couldn't tell them no on Christmas." And I said, "But you could tell my son no, right?" Then Stephanie appeared with a glass of wine in her hand and said not to be so dramatic, that Jacob was fine with Andrew's grandparents, that he probably wouldn't even notice the difference. And there's something in me broke. All the times I had kept quiet, all the times I had let their comments slide, all the times I had tried to be the understanding daughter and sister, all of that evaporated in that moment. I told them, loud enough for everyone to hear, and that it was incredible. They had lied to me to specifically exclude Jacob from the family Christmas, while I had been sending them $1,000 monthly for over a year. There was total silence in the room. People stopped talking. The kids kept playing without understanding what was happening, but all the adults were staring at us. My dad tried to say it wasn't the time to talk about that, and I said, "When is the time then? When is the appropriate time to talk about how you manipulated your widowed daughter to give you money while excluding your orphaned grandson from family celebrations?" My mom started crying, which is her classic manipulation technique, but this time I didn't care. I kept talking. I told the whole family present that my parents had made me believe that Stephanie was also contributing money when she never did, that it had all been a plan to get money from me after my husband died. And then Stephanie, bless her inability to stay quiet, yelled that I had $300,000 and that she was only asking for a little help for her family. She said the exact amount, out loud, in front of her husband, Eric, who apparently had no idea that I had been sending money monthly or how much Andrew's insurance had been. Eric looked at her like, "What? What are you talking about?" And that's when everything completely exploded. Eric started asking Stephanie about the money. She tried to justify herself, saying it was for the family, that her parents needed help, and he said that he paid all the household bills. Why did Stephanie need extra money from her widowed sister? My parents were trying to quiet everyone down, but it was already too late. Several of my uncles and cousins started asking what was going on, and basically I had to explain the whole situation right there in the middle of Christmas dinner. Some family members took my side immediately. My Aunt Patricia, my mom's sister, said it was absolutely disgusting what they had done. How was it possible they would exclude Jacob when that child had just lost his father? Other relatives started expressing their disgust too, and several said that if that was the kind of family my parents wanted to have, they didn't want to be part of it. There was like a mass exodus, where basically half the people at that Christmas party grabbed their things and left. Eric was having an intense argument with Stephanie in a corner. My parents were yelling at me that I had ruined Christmas, and I simply told them they had ruined much, more than a dinner, grabbed my coat, and left. I drove back to my in-laws' house, and when I got there, Jacob was in the living room, with Thomas doing an experiment with baking soda and vinegar volcanoes. He had that huge smile on his face, completely oblivious to the drama that had just exploded, and when he saw me come in, he ran toward me yelling, "Mommy, look what we did!" And I hugged him and thought, this is my real family. These people who are here taking care of my son on Christmas, making him feel loved and safe. Diane made me hot chocolate. I sat with them, and we spent the rest of the night watching Christmas movies, while Jacob explained all the science behind his experiments to me. The following days were chaos with messages and calls. My parents sent me texts saying I owed them an apology for making a scene. Stephanie wrote me a super long message justifying herself and saying I had misinterpreted everything, that she never wanted to hurt Jacob. Pure lies. But I also received messages from several relatives, my uncles, cousins, even some I hadn't seen in years, telling me they had no idea how my parents and Stephanie had treated me, that they always thought I was the favorite, when apparently it was the complete opposite, and that they wanted to stay in touch with me and Jacob. My Aunt Patricia invited me to spend New Year's with her family, and it was the first time in years that I felt truly welcome at a family gathering. I blocked my parents and Stephanie from my phone, social media, everything. I have no contact with them and honestly don't plan to ever again. Eric, Stephanie's husband, contacted me a few weeks later to apologize, said he had no idea what was going on, that he was furious with Stephanie for lying to him about finances for over a year, and that they were in couples therapy, but he didn't know if their marriage was going to survive this. I felt a little sorry for him because he had always been decent to me, but I told him I couldn't get involved in their marital problems, that I had enough on my plate rebuilding my own life, and these last few months have been like breathing fresh air after drowning. I stopped sending that monthly money, obviously, and instead I'm putting it in Jacob's college account along with any extra I can save. Jacob is incredible. He's still obsessed with science. His teachers say he's a brilliant and curious child. And he has a beautiful relationship with my in-laws who see him practically as their own son at this point. We spend a lot of time with them, we have weekly dinners, and they're helping me keep Andrew's memory alive for Jacob in healthy ways, showing him photos, telling him stories about his dad, that kind of thing. I've also gotten closer to the members of my extended family who took my side, like my Aunt Patricia and some cousins, and it's weird but also nice to discover that I have family who really cares about us without expecting anything in return. My therapist says what I did was establish healthy boundaries, that it was an act of self-preservation and protection toward Jacob, and that although it was painful, it was necessary. I'm still processing the fact that my own parents and my sister saw me as basically an ATM after Andrew's death, that they were willing to manipulate and lie to me for so long. There are days when it hurts. There are days when I wonder if I overreacted at that Christmas dinner, but then I remember they deliberately excluded my 7-year-old son who lost his father, and I know I made the right decision. Last week, Jacob asked me if we were going to see Grandma and Grandpa soon. I told him no, that sometimes families separate and it's okay, that it doesn't mean we did something wrong, just that some people don't know how to love us the way we deserve. He thought for a moment and then said, "But we have Grandma Diane and Grandpa Thomas, right?" And I told him, "Yes, we have them and many other people who truly love us." He said, "Okay, Mommy. Then, I'm not sad," and went back to playing with his Legos. And that's enough for now, I guess. We're okay, Jacob and I. We're building our own version of family, one that doesn't include manipulation or favoritism or lies, and honestly, I've never felt more at peace with a decision